I should have known something was off the moment I pulled into the driveway and saw all the extra cars. Leia told me it was just going to be a family healing dinner. Her exact words. She said the boys had been going through a rough patch emotionally, and it might help if we all sat down, had a meal, talked things through. I thought maybe she was finally trying to move forward, to co-parent like grown adults instead of acting like courtroom gladiators every time we disagreed. So yeah, I was hopeful. Nervous, but hopeful. But when I walked in and saw not just my two sons, but Leia's parents, her sister, even some family friends I hadn't spoken to in years, my gut clenched. It didn't feel like healing. It felt like a setup. Everyone went quiet when I walked in. Dinner started off, staged. Plastic smiles. Passive-aggressive comments buried under mashed potatoes and wine. Leia sat at the head of the table, her tone overly cheery, like a host on a talk show. My oldest son, Eli, barely looked at me. My youngest, Noah, sat stiffly, arms crossed. Then Leia stood up. Before dessert, she said, we'd like to share something important. I remember the way her lips twitched, like she was holding back a grin. The lights dimmed. Someone hit play on a projector. And then it began. The title card read, The Man Who Ruined Our Lives. I thought it was a joke at first. A prank. But within 30 seconds, I realized this was no parody. This was a full-blown hit piece. Clips of Eli and Noah talking to the camera, tears in their eyes. Saying they never felt heard. That I was always too busy. That I cared more about work than birthdays. Old photos flashed by. Me at the office, me falling asleep on the couch, me missing school events. No context. No explanation. Then came Leia's voice. Calm, reflective, like she was narrating a trauma documentary. She said I emotionally abandoned the family. That I left her to raise the boys alone. That my absence created a void they were still trying to crawl out of. I just sat there, frozen. It felt like someone had shoved a knife between my ribs. No one looked at me. Not even the boys. Not one word in the entire 20-minute video mentioned that the year I missed the most birthdays was the same year I worked 70-hour weeks to pay for her mother's cancer treatment. Not one frame mentioned how I sold my car to cover medical bills. Not one second acknowledged that I'd slept in my office for a month straight to avoid gas money, just so the boys could keep their extracurriculars. They showed the what, never the why. When the video ended, Leia clapped softly and said, We just wanted to give you a chance to see how your choices affected us. Then Eli looked at me, eyes glassy, and said, Dad, can you help with tuition? It wasn't a dinner. It was a stage. And I was the villain in their script. I didn't sleep that night. I drove around aimlessly for hours, barely registering the roads or the blinking streetlights. I kept replaying that video in my head, over and over. The tears in my son's eyes, the smug look on Leia's face, the sheer silence in that room while my reputation was shredded. And then, after all that, Eli asking for tuition money. Like that was the encore. It wasn't even the money that stunned me. It was how transactional it all felt. Like the documentary was a down payment on guilt, and now I was supposed to cough up the rest in cash. Back home, I poured myself a drink and pulled out my old journals. Yeah, I kept notes. Logs, really. Not because I expected any of this, but because when you live under constant judgment, you learn to cover your own ass. April 3rd, 2016, Leia's mom's chemo starts. Took second job. Told boys I'd miss Noah's recital. He cried. Leia said, they'll understand someday. Someday never came. I looked at my bank statements from those years. Child support payments made on time, extra deposits during holidays, gifts sent even when I couldn't be there in person. I found an old email I sent Eli after I missed his science fair. I'm proud of you. I'm sorry I couldn't make it. I'm working overtime so you won't have to worry about college debt. One day you'll understand. Apparently, today wasn't that day either. The next morning, I got a follow-up text from Leia. We really hope you'll step up and help Eli. He's worked so hard. Don't let your pride get in the way of your responsibility. My pride. I didn't respond. Instead, I called my buddy Marcus. He's a financial advisor who's helped me set up the college fund when we first divorced. I asked him to pull the account info, how much was left, how it was performing. When he called me back, he sounded confused. Man, that account's been empty for over a year. What do you mean empty? I asked. Cleaned out. A full withdrawal, $140,000. Made from your joint authorization. Signed by you and Leia. That was impossible. I never signed anything. He emailed me the digital documents. My signature was there, But it wasn't mine. Not really. It looked copied. Maybe even scanned from something else. I felt sick. I logged into the old child support portal from back when payments were state-monitored before Leia pushed for private handling. Something else was off. The payment address had been changed 6 months after the divorce. Supposedly at my request. But I never made the request. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about healing. This was a performance. A play called Deadbeat Dad, directed by Leia, starring our sons, backed by forged documents and manufactured narratives. Intuition? That wasn't a need. That was the final act of a con. I didn't know everything yet, but I knew enough to stop playing along. I spent the next week unraveling a web I hadn't even realized I was caught in. First thing I did was go to the bank in person. I showed them the withdrawal forms from the college fund account and asked for the original authorization logs. The branch manager, a guy named Phil I'd met during setup, pulled up the internal access trail. That's when the truth started bleeding out. The withdrawal hadn't come from a visit or a proper two-party request. It had come from an online access form submitted through a shared login. The IP address? Leia's home network. The digital signature? A JPEG of my name, identical to one I'd used on a mortgage form 5 years earlier. It was copied and pasted. Phil lowered his voice and said, "This smells like fraud. If you want to press it, we'll cooperate." I did. Then I called the child support department. They confirmed the redirection of payments and faxed me the request form. Another forged signature. I still had no idea how she'd managed to override the verification calls until I remembered Leia worked for a tech vendor during the divorce. She knew enough about systems to play them. That's when I called a private investigator. Her name was Alexis. Sharp, direct, no nonsense. I told her everything. The video, the money, the signatures. Within 2 days, she had bank records, social media screenshots, even photos of Leia on vacation in Bali during the exact month she told the boys she was scraping by and couldn't afford heating. Her business, which I thought was a humble consulting gig, was actually booming. She'd funneled college funds into it, then used the brand of a single struggling mom to generate donations, partnerships, and sympathy-based clients. Leia wasn't just painting me as a villain, she'd built an empire on it. The PI's final report included Venmo logs of her transferring money from the boys' educational fund into her personal account labeled Spa Weekend Nail Polish. New launch outfit. Deserve this. It was like she didn't think anyone would ever check. But the worst part? Screenshots of her DMs with one of her friends, bragging. "He thinks the college fund's still intact, LOL. Wait till I hit him up for tuition. Watch the guilt payout." That line broke me. Not because it surprised me, but because it confirmed something I'd been afraid to admit. She didn't just lie. She planned it. Every speech, every performance, every tear. I wasn't some careless, cold father. I was her storyline, her scapegoat, her ATM. That night, I opened my laptop and started organizing everything. Every forged signature, every false claim, every financial record. If they wanted a documentary, I'd give them one. But this time, it would be based on facts. I titled it The Other Side of the Story. I didn't have fancy editing software or a production crew. Just a folder full of receipts, a quiet rage, and hours of free time I wasn't using to apologize for things I hadn't done. I started with a voiceover in my own voice, steady but raw. This is for my sons. And for anyone else who was told who I was without being shown. The video opened with their documentary's title card, The Man Who Ruined Our Lives. Then I faded in the bank statements, college account withdrawal dates, matched with Leia's Instagram vacation posts. Split screen. Left. A text from Leia to Eli. "We can't afford SAT tutoring. Dad doesn't care." Right. A payment from my account for $1,800 labeled SAT prep deposit. I showed every financial transaction, every support payment, every holiday wire transfer, even the time I sent Leia $500 after her emergency root canal, which the PI revealed was actually for a private boat tour in Santorini. I layered in emails, audio from voicemails, a scanned letter from the state confirming her request to reroute child support, signed by me, except the signature didn't match any form I'd actually submitted. Then came the side-by-side comparisons, the signature from our house deed versus the one used on the college fund withdrawal. I highlighted every pixel that proved it was a copy-paste job. The closing shot was simple, a screenshot of her message bragging about watching me guilt pay. And then, black screen. Text, "Before you judge a man for not being there, ask who blocked the door." I sent it to Eli and Noah. No introduction. No defense. Just the link. They didn't reply. Not for 3 days. On the fourth day, I got a knock on my door. It was Eli. He looked thinner, eyes darker. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there holding his phone, shaking slightly. Finally, he whispered, "Did she really do all of that?" I didn't gloat. Didn't say, "I told you so." I just nodded. "Yeah, I never stopped trying to be your dad, even when it was happening behind my back." He came in. We sat at the kitchen table for over an hour. He asked questions. I showed him everything, let him scroll, click, read. Halfway through, Noah joined us. Apparently, Eli had forwarded him the video. They didn't cry. They didn't apologize. They just looked tired, confused, like kids who finally realized the monster in the closet was their map of the house. I didn't need revenge. I just needed the truth to be undeniable. A week later, I emailed the video, along with full documentation, to every person who'd watched that first dinner debacle. Leia's parents, her sister, their friends, even the school counselor who once called me disengaged. I didn't ask for reactions, but I got them. The counselor wrote back, "I owe you an apology." Her father sent a one-line email, "We were wrong." And then came the fallout. I didn't intend to destroy Leia. I just wanted the truth to stand on its own. But the thing about lies that big, they rot from the inside. And once exposed to light, they collapse fast. Within 2 weeks of sending the video out, Leia's perfectly curated life began to unravel. Her consulting business, built on her resilient single mom branding, took a hit first. One of her main clients emailed her partners after watching my video. The email read, "If this is the integrity behind your leadership, we're pulling out." The partners called an emergency meeting. One of them even contacted me directly, asking for documentation. I didn't gloat. I just handed over a redacted version of the PI's report. It was enough. They dissolved the partnership quietly. Her website disappeared within a few days. Then came the school. Noah's counselor, who'd once sided fully with Leia, now called me in for a meeting. She apologized formally. Told me they'd been operating under false assumptions for years, thanks to selective narratives. They updated my parent access privileges, reinstated my emergency contact status, and offered counseling to help the boys adjust to this new truth. But nothing compared to what came next. Leia spiraled. She started posting strange rants online, accusing me of manipulating people, of hacking into her accounts, even of staging the evidence. The more she posted, the more unhinged she seemed. Eli texted me late one night. "She says you're stalking her. Is that true?" I replied calmly. "I haven't seen her in person since the dinner. Everything I shared was either public record or legally obtained." Silence. Then, "Yeah, that's what I thought. She's been acting off." A week later, she filed for a restraining order. Claimed I was harassing her. But when we showed up in court, her claims dissolved under the weight of my documentation. The judge dismissed it in 10 minutes. In fact, he scolded her, said it looked retaliatory. That's when I saw it. The crack. Leia wasn't angry anymore. She was panicked. The woman who once orchestrated an entire stage documentary had lost control of the narrative. And without her lies, she was lost. Her family stopped taking her calls. Her friends unfollowed her. The pity party she used to host so easily had no guests left. And then, quietly, she checked herself into a mental health treatment facility. Eli told me. "She's not okay," he said, eyes glassy. "She's been crying a lot. Says she doesn't remember doing half the stuff." I didn't cheer. I didn't feel triumph. Just grief. For what we lost. For what she became. But I also felt something else. Clarity. She'd spent years weaponizing confusion, twisting love into guilt, turning silence into stories. Now, the silence was finally mine again, and I knew exactly what to do with it. It wasn't just Leia who unraveled. It was the entire framework she'd built. Every whispered lie, every emotional manipulation, every trust she exploited. The court hearings started changing tone. What used to be "he didn't show up" became "he provided extensive documentation." My attorney filed for a custody adjustment. We presented the PI's findings, the forged signatures, the misappropriated funds. We didn't exaggerate. We didn't even have to. The evidence was enough. The judge issued temporary adjustments within a week. Weekends with me turned into shared custody. Then, after Leia's hospital admission and her inability to meet basic obligations, full custody was granted pending further review. I'll never forget the day Noah walked into my apartment carrying a single duffel bag. He dropped it on the floor, looked around, and said, "So this is what peace sounds like." Eli followed a week later. At first, we were like strangers in a fragile truce. We tiptoed around each other. I kept dinners simple, routines predictable. No lectures. No guilt tripping. Just space. It was the silence that healed us, slowly. The kind that isn't empty, but safe. We started therapy together, me and the boys. A quiet office with an older guy named Howard who wore corduroy jackets and had a voice like a warm blanket. In those sessions, I learned just how deeply Leia had shaped their view of me. She told us you left because we weren't good enough, Noah said once, eyes locked on the floor. Eli added, she said you stopped loving us, that we reminded you too much of her. Hearing that felt like drowning, but I didn't interrupt. I just listened. Session by session, we unpacked the lies. Not to weaponize them, but to disarm them. I told them everything I'd been too tired or afraid to say back then. How scared I'd been when Leia's mom got sick. How hard it was to pretend I was okay while we bled money. How I'd cry alone in my car just to release the pressure before walking through the front door. And I admitted my mistakes. That I should have communicated more. That presence isn't just about paying bills. It's about being visible. They didn't forgive me all at once. But the walls started to crack. One night, Eli knocked on my bedroom door. Hey, do you still have that old chessboard? We played for hours. No words. Just quiet moves. And when he checkmated me, he smiled for the first time in what felt like years. Noah started leaving his bedroom door open. Small gestures. Huge meaning. And Leia? She sent a letter from the treatment facility. Pages of rambling reflections, half apologies, half deflections. I read it once, then filed it away. I don't hate her. I just don't trust her. Everything now goes through documented channels. Child support, school communication, legal correspondence. I don't deviate. No more phone calls. No more can we just talk? The door isn't open anymore. And for the first time in years, I feel okay about that. The first time I heard them both laughing in my kitchen again, I had to walk out of the room. Not because I was angry or hurt, but because I didn't want them to see the tears coming. They were just goofing off, arguing over cereal brands. Noah was insisting Cinnamon Toast Crunch was objectively superior, and Eli was threatening to launch a peanut butter coup. It was a stupid, beautiful moment. For so long, my role in their lives had been distorted into a caricature. I was the absent dad, the cold provider, the man who ruined everything. That label followed me like a shadow. And for a while, I believed it too. But now, we were rebuilding. Not from some fantasy of a perfect family, but from scraps of truth, honesty, and awkward, healing silence. I stopped walking on eggshells. If I needed to say something, I did. If I messed up, I owned it. We were far from perfect. There were still moments where old habits crept in. Eli once snapped at me during dinner, then froze like he expected a blowback. I just looked at him and said, it's okay to be upset. Let's talk it through. No fireworks. Just safety. One weekend, Noah brought me a drawing he'd made for a school project. It was a family tree. At the center was a stick figure version of me, holding two boys' hands. He'd labeled it, Dad. The one who stayed even when we didn't see him. I had to step into the hallway and collect myself. That line stuck with me, because that's what this whole mess had been about. I wasn't perfect. I wasn't always emotionally present. But I never stopped trying. Never stopped caring. The lies Leia told were loud. They echoed. They stained. But the truth held. Quietly. Steadily. When you spend years being blamed, you start to internalize guilt that was never yours. You rewrite your own memories to fit someone else's story. You convince yourself that maybe, just maybe, you were the villain they made you out to be. But I know who I am now. I know what I gave, what I lost, what I fought for. And most importantly, I know what I have. My sons. Not just under my roof, but in my life. For real. For the first time in years. We don't talk about Leia much. Not because we're erasing her, but because we're not letting her distort the narrative anymore. She exists on the periphery now, emails, court updates, scheduled phone calls. But in this home, there's no more editing truth for the comfort of others. Just real moments. Honest ones. And peace. Not the loud kind that demands recognition. The quiet kind that lets you finally exhale.